Okay, so I have my logo separated by different layers on my stage here or on my main page. So what we're going to go into next is animating this and moving the different parts around on the page to create this little animation. So you can do this layer by layer, or you can move multiple things at one time. But basically we're going to do this by using keyframes. So here's our little timeline, and it tells us we have 24 frames per second. So that's little increments that you could frame by frame, like do a stop motion animation and create a little animation that way. But instead, this program kind of fills in the frames in between. So what we have is our keyframes. Keyframes are like right here, there's a little dot in this frame column. So these are all the individual frames. These first frames have a keyframe, meaning that is the image that is going to be on the screen during frame 1. Right now, everything else is blank. So basically what we want to do is add keyframes to show the beginning and the end of each animation. So I'm going to start with, let's start with the name. So at the beginning here, I could go and like drag and like move everything off screen if I wanted to have it a blank screen to start. By the way, this is the arrow tool, and you can select different elements. This is a transform tool, so you can like rotate and like change the size of things, because you might need to do that quite a bit. So I'm going to go down to where it says the double dog, the DD, to this layer, and you can see my keyframe now. Everything's off to the side in the first frame. I'm going to go down the timeline. Let's just go to 2 seconds, and I'm going to click. That's just showing, okay, this first little movement is going to be 2 seconds long. So you could just start and try 1 or 2 seconds, and you can always change it later. So with everything you're going to animate, what you're going to start with is creating 2 keyframes, a beginning and an end of that animation or that movement that you're going to create. So I have that, it automatically comes with one at the beginning. So I'm going to click here and it insert a keyframe after 2 seconds. So it isolates. This double dog is the only thing that's in this frame because everything else is just in the first frame. So right now, if I move the little time indicator to the beginning, everything's there. But if I move it down the path, down the timeline, only that double dog remains. Now, nothing's happening yet. I'm going to add some motion here in a second. So I'm just setting the time. So I'll do that with each one of these when I start. I'm going to right click on this time bar and go to create a classic tween. Just hit OK. It's going to say it needs to be a symbol, and that's fine. A classic tween, what it's going to do is it's going to blend together the first frame and the last frame, and it's going to create the in-between movements. That's like the in-between movement. So I'll show you what I mean. Nothing is happening yet. So with everything you're going to move, just create a keyframe at the beginning and at the end of the time period you want to create the animation. And then you're going to right click on the bar and create a classic tween. Then you're going to go and do the movement. So here I have at the beginning, he's sitting here. If I want it to move onto the page, I'm going to go to the end of the 2 seconds where I've created that other keyframe. And I'm going to go up here with my arrow tool. And I'm going to hold shift so it stays nice and straight. And I'm just going to move it onto my page. Okay, because I've had a tween, I've added the tweening, it's going to do the frames in between. It automatically fills it. So look, now for this animation, it slides in. So if I press play, which is right here, that double dog will slide into place. Now, I wasn't sure about the timing. If I need to change the timing, I can always go to the end of the timeline here. And if I wanted it to speed up, I would make it like that movement happen in fewer amount of seconds. If I wanted to make it go slower, I could elongate the time. So you would go to the end and hold control, and then you can adjust the time. So if I make this go to 1 second, it'll go in a lot faster when I press play. So you can press play or hit enter. So that falls into place. So let's try this one more time. I'm going to bring in Studio now. I'm going to go back, move this little timeline back to the first frame where everything is sitting and waiting. It's got a keyframe here. So I need to move this keyframe. I'm going to go to the same place, add a keyframe at the end. Oops. I'm on the wrong layer, so I just quickly Control Z. I need to make sure I click on the layer Studio. I was still clicked on this bottom layer. So I'm going to add, no, I'm going to put my cursor. I have to click on the frame. Sorry, I was just using the time thing, but you actually have to click on the frame that you want to select, which is the same one above the double dogs, and then I click a keyframe. Before I do anything, I'm going to right click and create a tween that does that in between movement. Okay, so for this one, maybe I want to, actually, I'm going to move this guy. I'm going to shift. I'm going to have him come from the other way. So at the beginning, he's here. And then at the end, well, I moved, it was too far. It was going from the beginning. I'm going to move it. It's just going to go in about halfway. Let's try that again. So these are going to come in like that. Okay, try this one more time. I'm going to go to the circle layer. We're going to go and click back on the first frame. This circle is, let's have it fade in. So we're just moving so far. So you can move things between keyframes. You can also have the opacity change, and that's a little bit different. So what we're going to do is, let me just go, we're going to go to this point. Okay, so I'm going to make the circle. I'm just going to go down here, click on the frame, add a keyframe, right click, create a classic tween. So for every single one of those, I'm doing that. So the circle, what I think we should do with the circle is, I'm going to move it into place. I really want to make sure I'm aligning it correctly too. So that circle is moving there, but I kind of feel like it needs a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is have it start over here. I'm going to have it start really small. So I'm going to click here, the transform button, and hold shift. Let me zoom out a little. I'm going to hold shift to make it really small, but so it's in proportion. So I'm at the beginning here on the circle. I've moved it, and I've also changed the size. So when I go to play, it's going to get bigger as it moves. So I started small on this, and then I ended it large, and it automatically does the in between. Now, if I wanted to do something more, I could always go in here and move my timeline. Maybe I want it to go and fade in. So I've just moved it. I've scaled it. I can add, make sure you're on the right layer, another keyframe within here if I wanted to, and I could change, let's say, the opacity. So at this point, it's getting bigger, goes from small to big, it's moving across. So I'm applying multiple effects now. So to make something change the opacity, you are going to have to go up to object and down to color effect. So I've added a keyframe. It already has the tweening. These little lines indicate tweening. So I've added the keyframe by clicking here in the timeline where I want to add it. And now I can go down here, and you actually go to color effects and go to alpha. Alpha changes the opacity. So what I can do is right where it starts here, it's gonna start. I'm gonna have it be 100%. No, I want it to be low. That's right, low, and then so it's going to be 0% opacity here. And by the time it gets here, it's going to go back to its normal. So I just turn down the opacity there, and let's see what it looks like. Play. So if I wanted to, let's say I'm going to have this carry on here. I could have it once again go. There's no tween here, so I'm going to create a tween. Then these different options show up. So I'm going to click on it with my arrow tool so that I can see the color. I have to go up. There we go. Double click on there. Object. If you double click, look at it, gets rid of my layer. It put me in an isolation mode. So I'm going to click back actually. Up at the top here, you can click back. Okay, I've got to actually click on the keyframe. And I was just, down here, I added a new keyframe. And then what I want to do is go to object I'm clicked on the keyframe, not the tween. And then I want to go to alpha again, and I want to make it, it's going to disappear again at the very end. So let's see, it should kind of fade in and out. Okay, and now these other ones as well, like maybe I want to extend them because they are not long enough and they disappear. So I can just hold Control, go to the very end and just like bring them out. Oops, I want to make sure that I grab the right area to do that. So sometimes it gets a little finicky, like where you're grabbing things. Like this guy, I'm going to have to go and just move those. So I'm holding Control, and I want to make sure I move this tween over as well. Oop, Control Z if it messes up. It's very, very finicky. Okay, so now these guys kind of fade in and out. I kind of like, I don't want it to be, I don't like that it's completely gone. So I'm going to go back here to the circle, go to Object, and I want to make it 100%. I want it to be there still. So we have things fading. I could grab all of these if I want to, hold Shift and just grab all of those. And then I could, let me do this again. Let me move. Oh, I could go here. Let's see. I'm going to grab all three of these by holding Shift, these frames. And then I could add a keyframe to all three at once. And then I could have them all fade away under Object all at once. So it's going to go. So you can do things all together as well.